Alright, in this video, we will be looking at the scale of evaluation. Now, what exactly is evaluation? Now, imagine you actually have you basically have 2 or 3 points, okay? 2 or 3 points being put together, right? Now, if they ask you which is the most important, okay? Most important, alright? Or you may get maybe for the most important, the most harmful, okay, the most harmful, maybe you get something like maybe for example the most significant, okay, significant, okay, most important, most harmful, most significant. So these are some possible questions that you may be asked when they are asking you to evaluate. So ultimately what you need to do is you need to be able to present your points, 2 or 3 points, okay? And basically they're going to ask you, of these 3 points, which is the most important, which is the most harmful, or which is the most significant, depending on the question. Now, in this case here, you will need to have what I call a criteria. This criteria will actually help you to sort of frame your answer in order for you to have an answer that is really justified across these 3 different points. Of these 3 different points, this is the most important because of the criteria. Alright, so what are some criteria that we can look at? 1, time scale. We can evaluate points based on time scale. What do I mean by that? Is this impact a long-term impact, or is this a short-term impact? Now, of course, if it's a long-term impact, then yes, we will be talking about something that is more significant because there's a long-term impact. For example, something can be more harmful because it impacts a person negatively over a longer run, in that sense that long-term. Second is what I call the extent of impact. Okay? Does it affect a whole population? Or does it affect a small group? So this is what I mean by extent of impact. Of course, if something affects a whole population, it definitely is much more important, much more significant than if it actually affects a smaller group here. Okay, of course, there are some who actually want to try a balanced conclusion. Okay, meaning to say that of these 2 or 3 points, actually, right, all these 3 points, right, are equally important in explaining this issue. These 3 points are equally important in explaining the impact. These 3 points are equally important, okay, to talk about the reasons for the rise of this person. So, balanced conclusion. All factors are equal. Okay, and another one we can actually talk about is this idea of a root versus contributing factor. So therefore, for example, let's just say for example, we call root A, alright, and contributing B. So what do I mean by root and contributing? Now, without point A, without factor A, B wouldn't have happened, alright? So for example, it'll be something like this lah, okay? Without the cooking food, we will not have food to eat. Alright, so it's something like the root factor is the cook that is cooking. The contributing factor is we ended up finishing all the food. Okay, so something to that extent. Let's take a look at an example now very clearly, or to clarify this. So let's just say we have this question: is school closure more positive than providing financial help during an emergency? Alright, so imagine you have already written your 2 paragraphs, you describe, you explain it already. This is just here as a fictitious paragraph, alright? Just to provide an example, to highlight the example. There's really no example whatever inside. So now the question here is school closures, providing financial help. Which is most significant? Okay, which is most positive? Alright, okay, this idea most positive in this sense here. So what I will do, I will take a look at these 2 school closures, okay, providing financial help. So providing financial help, okay, we are going to assume it's from the government here. So I would actually look at it in terms of the extent of the impact, for example. So extent of the impact, right? School closures, who will it affect? It will affect students, teachers, and perhaps parents, right? Okay, so it will affect this group of people. However, for providing financial help, if you realize that providing financial help from the government, right, it actually helps the entire population. So it's not just one group of people, it's not just parents, it's not just students or teachers, for example. It helps the whole population. So because it helps the whole population, the impact is more widespread than, say, for example, the students, the teachers, and the parents. So if I close school, maybe it will be benefit for the students because they are able to learn more skills online, for example, like what is written here in the paragraph. Okay, maybe for parents it's a good thing because family time can increase. Maybe for teachers it's good because they can, have a little bit of a break. But when it comes to this money thing, okay, it's not just when it comes to this providing financial help. The government cannot just provide financial help to one group of people and that's it. During an emergency, everybody gets something that's equal. Okay, and because of that, they help the entire population, and And if you look at it, the providing of the financial help here therefore becomes a more positive factor, okay, than students, teachers, and parents. So in this case here, right, the more, because it's between two, right, so-called the most important factor is only one of the two, right? Because in this sense here, when I look at the idea of most here, is because, right, when we look at 2 or 3 points, if there are 3 points, sometimes in a history essay, your teacher may ask you to write 3 paragraphs, for example. Then out of these 3 paragraphs, which is the most important? So just to clarify why in the question you see a more important versus what I mentioned, the most important or the most positive or the more positive question. Alright, so I hope that helps to clarify this. So this is one way that I can do it in terms of the extent of the impact. Okay, we look at say, for example, the whole population versus a small group of people. Now I'm just going to erase this away. Alright, I'm just going to erase this away and perhaps look at something with a little bit more, okay, yeah. Okay, so again, right, it goes back, this idea of evaluation actually goes back to how you argue your point out. Now, if your point that you argue out makes sense to the marker, if the analysis makes sense, you will get the mark. Now, let's look at it from this angle. Let's take a look at it from a time scale angle, a long-term versus a short-term thing. Now, if I look at it, maybe for example, school closures, right, maybe it just has a short-term impact, okay, short-term impact. Now, versus, say, for example, providing financial help may give you longer term impacts. Now, how is this the case? Short-term impact, yes, students are able to learn more skills. Students can actually have more family time. So tech skills, family time, learn a new thing, and time for hobbies, right? So these are positive things. But why is it short-term? It's short-term because, right, it can only take place for a period of time. Okay, for a period of time, okay, until people go back to school, then these so-called benefits from school closure, you don't see it anymore, right? So that's why it's not as important. However, this is a long-term impact because if you look at this here, because immediate money worries are eased, people can focus on getting healthy and find work once things improve, okay? People will feel safer and more united here. So if we take a look at this, right, we can see here that this is a longer term impact. Because, right, it's not just simply about giving you money now and that's it. But the idea here of providing financial help becomes long term because it helps people, and because of this, right, because they are able to help them in a immediate sense, they are able to find their footing again, and from them being able to find their footing, they can actually go on further. Okay, and they are encouraged to take one step further, for example, to find a new job, or for example, to be healthy. Okay, again, to be more confident of their future based on the help that is currently given to them. So as a result of it, it becomes a longer term impact and a longer term positive impact here, as compared to this which I mentioned was a shorter term positive impact. So just to take note, When you are explaining one over the other, yes, you have to explain why one is more important than the other. But like what I did earlier on, I actually explained why this is less positive than this point. Okay, why this is less positive? Because it's a shorter term. You can take it only happens in a period of time where students are at home, but once they go back to school, they stop all this already, right? So as compared to a longer term impact whereby the providing of the funds actually help people be able to give them more confidence in their own future. All right, so this is basically how we do an evaluation for our essay questions, especially